College football conference expansion. Where does it stand right now? Where will it land? We got Steve Dace on the line from Michigan Podcast. Has an amazing YouTube channel. Just look him up right here at Michigan Podcast. Steve, how's it going today?
Good to see you, brother. How are you?
I am doing well. We just recorded another Michigan podcast here, so check us out over on Steve's channel, Talking College Football Expansion over there. And you got to check on Steve's picks. Go to Patreon. And his weekly picks are, of course, coming up here in 5 weeks when it kicks off, and you want to lock in on those. College football expansion, I will start with a very basic question. Is this good for college football, meaning Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC?
I don't think that it is. And I think that what you're seeing is, I talked about this on my daily program today, Mark, is that This whole story, I think, is the collapse of every side of America's cultural battlefield. Every side has collapsed. Their belief system has. We're heading down a road here. For those of you that might be of a more progressive bent, we're heading down the road here of denying opportunity and agency to a lot of minority and female athletes here, because if we're going to have mega super conference consolidation, they're not doing 85 scholarships anymore. They're going to do like 60. Okay. And that means you're going to see the elimination of a lot of football programs around the country who are doing 85 scholarships. You're still going to do 85 scholarships in the MAC. You're still going to do 85 scholarships in the Sun Belt. And then there's the amount of scholarships I think you'll see lost by the schools that are even involved in the brave new world. I think you'll see women's sports eliminated, because they can do that now when they cut down the scholarships to football. That's a couple of female sports they don't have to subsidize anymore. And then I think you're going to see a lot of men's Olympic sports gone. Like we'll even have wrestling in Iowa anymore. You can't just wrestle Iowa, Penn State, Oklahoma State. Can't be the whole sport. When there's only a handful of schools willing to do scholarships for a sport like that, or a hockey at a Michigan where it's big, at our school. I think that's a problem. I think for those that consider yourselves more conservative, what about tradition, heritage, legacy? Mark, we've just thrown that all out the window. Why? So Texas and Oklahoma can earn another 20, 25 million a year. Well, Steve, that's a lot of money. Well, Texas was already the number one revenue generating athletic department in the country. Oklahoma was in the top 10. How much money does anybody need? Well, as much as I can get paid, regardless of the cost. I mean, to me, when we're at a point now that Oklahoma's like, hey, being a top 10 athletic department ain't good enough. Let me leave Oklahoma State on the side of the road, maybe without a place to go. And Texas is like, we've averaged 7 wins a year for a decade and cycled through 3 head coaches. We can't finish higher. We can't win the damn Big 12. So let's go finish 5th, 6th, or 7th in the SEC to make 20 million more a year. I'm sure Texas fans who are yoking it up now, dude, you're going to be doing the horns down here in 5 or 6 years when you're 5th and 6th or 7th in the SEC. You're not going to be buying, hey, we got 20 million more a year T-shirts. And frankly, I think your old employer has a lot to do with this behind the scenes. I've been saying it for a week. Your old employer, ESPN, is why the Big 12 stayed together 10 years ago. They didn't want that Pac-12 merger to happen then, and so they gave Texas the Longhorn Network. Notice they're very silent right now. So here's what I think is really going on. What I think is really going on is ESPN has a limited window to negotiate that new playoff. And Disney as a whole, everybody's hurting for revenue right now. And I think that they want to start that playoff as soon as possible. But to do that, they need ESPN to sign off within the exclusivity window. I don't think ESPN wants that event to go, that new expanded playoff to go to market, because they'll likely, now you're going to bring in Amazon, Netflix, YouTube. Everybody's going to bid on something of that nature. And I think they're the ones pushing Texas and Oklahoma to do this. See, they didn't have an SEC network 10 years ago. They do now. And they have that like Fox has the Big Ten network. If we're talking about the SEC network the SEC is now going to generate $1 to $1.3 billion a year. A lot of that's going to be via the SEC network. Now ESPN has the money now to provide the revenue to hold on to its exclusivity window with the new expanded playoff, so that thing never goes to market. They don't care about the Big 12. It's a fringe partner of theirs. It's more of a partner of their competitor Fox. I think they're the one. That's why they're eerily quiet during all of this, when they were omnipresent during realignment 10 years ago when you were working there. And so I think they are the Charlie's Angels voice on the speaker driving this train quietly behind the scenes. And I just, there are things in life. I'm a capitalist. I'm not a robber baron. I'm not a mercantilist. I'm not a feudalist. There are things in life more important than money. The traditions, legacies of this great game, I think, in my opinion, are some of them, especially when we're talking about people that were already a freaking printing press, Mark. They were making more money. You ever seen Texas's track and field facilities? They're better than most college football teams' football facilities. It's just, this is unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and it's the kind of thing that ultimately leads to creating something that could potentially, I worry, ruin a sport that has been a great opportunity magnet for a lot of kids who otherwise couldn't get into college and now have degrees and have changed the course of their lives and the lives of how many families, and not just to mention the enjoyment that we have as fans.
Yeah, the product on the field isn't necessarily going to change. We're not going to be able to tell the difference between watching Texas of the Big 12 taking on Alabama of the SEC versus being in the same conference, but it just rips at the fabric of the sport, and it has the makings, not that it's there yet, but it has the makings of becoming a very sterile, generic sport. Well, these conferences might as well just be named Conference 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the future.
Hey, you know what? Hey, Texas fans, so you're not going to get together with your Texas Tech buddies and your Baylor buddies that y'all went to high school and stuff together and you've watched games together all your lives. You're not going to do that anymore. Instead, you're going to get your ass pounded by Alabama and LSU. And oh, by the way, whatever they were charging you at Memorial to go in and see Kansas State, what do you think the rate's going to be for one of those SEC opponents? But it's okay. You got $20 to $25 million a year to finish 5th place in the SEC. So knock yourselves out and take away what would have been. I mean, you were in a league that also made a lot of money, gave you anything you ever wanted, provided just as clear of a path to the college football playoff, and actually more of one. It's just greed for greed's sake. I'm a capitalist. I'm not a greediest. This is just greed for greed's sake. This is Gordon Gekko stuff.
You alluded to what happened 10 years ago in college football and the various expansion and moves and realignment. That followed some logical path. The rumors that we're hearing now, I'm sure many of them are just rumors, but many of them that are founded in real conversations that are going on are crazy stuff that would not have been thinkable 6 months ago. Ohio State to the SEC, things like that. Do you have any way of predicting what's going to happen? And let's narrow it down to the Big Ten. What should happen?
I think the same Big Ten presidents that tried to wreck last season might end up being the only mechanism we have to salvage any form of traditional college football as we've known it and come to love it. Here's why I say that. The only league that competes, well, at this point, it's more lucrative than the SEC. So the only league that supersedes the SEC from a lucrative standpoint is the Big Ten. Obviously, that changes. The calculus changes there if you bring in Oklahoma and Texas, changes considerably. How the Big Ten will respond to that, Mark, I believe, is going to determine whether we end up in this form of an NFL on Saturdays, as you just described, or we end up with, it looks a lot different. We still lost some traditions, okay, but we got Texas and Texas A&M back. It still has a lot of the permutations of the sport we love. And I think the Big Ten is going to decide that because I think they're holding the cards now and how they respond. Does the Big Ten believe, and when I say the Big Ten, I mean the presidents. I'll never forget, I was at Big Ten Media Days, Jerry DiNardo's first year at Indiana. And he had come over from the SEC where he had coached at LSU and Vanderbilt. And he's with the Big Ten Network now. And he was, first question he was asked was, what's the biggest difference between coaching in the SEC and the Big Ten? You know what his answer was, Mark? We don't have faculty reps in the SEC. Right? So even at Ohio State, your school, which may be the closest thing culturally to the SEC we have in the Big Ten, it probably is. it still culturally is nothing like what the SEC is. Academically, Ohio State has dramatically improved its profile. It's a top 50 university in the country now. You might be the high, other than a Texas, the highest rated public university in the SEC if you went there. And so in our league, we're really talking about the presidents. Our league and the Pac-12 are the only two leagues left where the presidents are still ascendant. Do the Big Ten presidents believe that the SEC is essentially trying to replace the NCAA? If they believe that the SEC is not done, still on the prowl, and essentially trying to fill a vacuum, because the NCAA is toast. It may still regulate the basketball tournament and Olympic sports championships, but as an enforcement mechanism or anything else, it's done in college football forever. And it might be done as a whole, frankly, we'll see. So does the Big Ten believe the SEC is trying to be the new NCAA? If it believes that, then I think you'll see the Big Ten move aggressively to protect the remaining AAU schools. That's the Association of I can't ever remember what it. Do you remember what it stands for, Mark?
The Association Academic.
Yeah, but it's the elite
Union.
of elite
Yes.
research universities in the country. Like all the Ivy League schools are in this. Every Big Ten school, the American Association of Universities is what it is, actually. Okay. Every Ivy League school is in this. Every Big Ten school but Nebraska is in this. 9 of the 12 Pac-12 schools are in it. Iowa State and Kansas are in it. It's a who's who of academia. I think if the Big Ten views the SEC as attempting to replace the NCAA, I think you'll see the Big Ten move together and maybe in accordance with the Pac-12 to protect AAU member institutions from that. Because as much money as athletics generates, these research grants and everything else are next level. The endowments, the academic endowments these schools have, next level compared to what athletics generates. I mean, Michigan athletics, I believe, generated $192 million or something last year in a COVID year. That's like, chicken feed compared to Michigan's endowment as a whole as a university. So I think you'll see, and Adam Rittenberg at ESPN has reported, and I agree with this, that the Big Ten he's hearing will not expand without including AAU schools. Nebraska was in the AAU when we added them. They just have been kicked out since. So I think that the Big Ten's presidents will align with the Pac-12 presidents to protect those AAU schools from the SEC, so that a Iowa State and a Kansas don't end up in like a Conference USA or MAC or something like that. And they'll form, I think, a mega structure of AAU, of the remaining AAU schools, which is most of the Pac-10 or Pac-12, all but one school in the Big Ten, and Iowa State and Kansas. And I think that will be their check and balance on the SEC. If they don't believe that the SEC is on the prowl, but that this was just something that just fell into their laps because Oklahoma and Texas just won out of the Big 12, then you may see the Big Ten do nothing, Mark, which I think it would prefer to do. I think it would prefer to do nothing, because anything it does now is a defensive posture. There's no move it could make that will add to its revenue, really. Everything else is some form of a larger pool of what exists already. Notre Dame is contractually obligated to the ACC. Doesn't want, and Notre Dame just accepted a playoff deal where it would never get a home playoff game in exchange for maintaining its independence. It's not going anywhere. So unless they think they can, now the one caveat here is, do they think they could poach a Virginia and or a Georgia Tech or North Carolina, who are also AAU schools, from the ACC? If they think they can do that, and I don't know if they can, if they think they can do that, then I think that's one way that the Big Ten would go on offense. But I think anything the Big Ten does will be in the best interest of the AAU. And if they do nothing, it's because they think that's in the best interest of AAU schools. And if they move, I think it'll be because they think it's in the best interest of the AAU schools to protect further manifest destiny plans from the SEC.